My name's Kerry Howells, and I'm presently working in the Faculty of Education in the University of Tasmania. So my main role is teacher education, but I also offer many workshops in different contexts on the role of gratitude in education, which I've been working on for the last almost 2 decades now.
Are teachers in secular schools a little bit wary of the term gratitude or the concept of gratitude?
Many of the teachers that I work with are very wary of the term gratitude for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because it has these connotations with religion and a forced way of being that has nothing to do with the secular world of education. Another reason why they don't really like the word gratitude, and they prefer words like appreciation, which don't necessarily have this giving back type dimension to it, is because this notion of indebtedness that gratitude tends to carry with it is something that they don't necessarily want to embrace, because they don't want to be forced into this way of being, of giving back if they don't really want to. And so they don't want to have to be something that the school or the state are trying to make them become. So my work is really trying to position this notion of gratitude in the complex domain of teachers' objections, which are very legitimate, and for us to yet, even though it is very complex, for us to not lose the wonderful things that gratitude can bring to the teaching and learning process. So sometimes I think that the word is so complex that one can actually throw out the baby with the bathwater by not keeping the whole elements of gratitude, which are really powerful beyond the complexity of the term. Gratitude is all about acknowledging what one receives from another person and giving back out of acknowledgement for what they receive. So the giving and receiving is very important. But when we put that in the context of education, so also is the gift. And the gift of education is really what we're trying to bring into the consciousness of people who are partaking in education. So there's the giver of education, who is the teacher, who is also the receiver of what they receive from being a teacher and being in the education system and having the opportunity to teach wonderful students. And then there's the students who are encouraged to become more aware of education, not as a right, but as a gift. There's been some really lovely work on states that are the opposite of gratitude, and one of those states is the position of entitlement. So when students consider themselves as clients, or if the education system positions them as clients, then they're more likely to feel entitled, and the more money they pay, for example, in HECS fees and other sort of school fees, then perhaps that position of entitlement, if not questioned, can be more cemented. So what tends to happen is that resentment and that complaint tends to cloud their consciousness and cloud their ability to be really present in their learning. And so I think a student who's not full of gratitude can be quite switched off and disengaged.
Are some teachers surprised that they have something to receive, and some students surprised that they have something to give?
Yeah, they're very surprised. And first of all, it's a bit of a foreign notion. But what I can give these teachers when they are surprised is many examples that I've collected of teachers who have been surprised, and then they experiment with a gratitude practice where they open themselves up to what they receive from students in ways that they haven't done in the past or haven't done for a very long time. And as a result of that, they report that they become more engaged in the teaching profession and calmer and more sort of full of the joy of teaching again. And equally so, students often don't necessarily see themselves as givers. But my whole hypothesis behind bringing this into the students' world is that I have this belief that students by nature really want to be engaged in the learning process, but they don't necessarily know how to be engaged at a deep level of their being. And so by pointing out to them that the state that's opposite to gratitude, the blaming and criticising and negative moaning and groaning and whinging, once they see that is actually undermining their ability to be engaged, they start to see the relevance of this way of thinking to the state of engagement that they naturally are really craving to have. And the focus on exams and technology and the learning and teaching sort of processes tend to, on the whole, omit this very important dimension of the state of being that students and teachers bring to the learning process. And this is where gratitude has a really important place to play. Coming back to the whole notion of gratitude as a practice, a very powerful practice for teachers, for example, is to recognise the areas of resentment that they have and to take one or two of those areas, not all of them, and to do something proactively to deal with that resentment. And so we often think about gratitude practices smiling more or being thankful more or thanking our students more, but actually the gratitude practices associated with addressing our resentment are more powerful in their outcomes than perhaps the other practices that are much more straightforward and ones normally associated with gratitude. In a school in Western Australia where I worked recently, one teacher decided to work with one student who was very disengaged, didn't come to class very often, and when they did, they were very disruptive, and they were a Year 11 student. This student had been so disrespectful that most of the year she really struggled with this student and recognised in herself that she only saw the bad points in this student. And so when she started to focus on the good points and look for things that she could really recognise in this student that were really good and that she was receiving from this student, and to change her attitude and to genuinely thank that student, because gratitude is not just thanking just for the act of thanking. It has to have that inner attitude or that heart of true gratitude, that true intention behind it for it to be gratitude. When that teacher started to genuinely thank that student, she started to become more engaged, more connected. She started to do more in class, and many of the other teachers started to notice changes just from that one teacher working with that one student. There was a sad element to this story as well, because after a few times of this teacher thanking that student, the student said this is the very first time any teacher has ever thanked her. This was a Year 11 student, and I hear many stories like this. So even though we might think that gratitude is alive and well in education, I'm hearing so many stories of where it isn't, and it's quite sad that we have a student that by Year 11 can't remember any teacher thanking her, especially when we see the power of one teacher's gratitude towards her. The primary school teachers that I work with do tell me that in a time of abundance and plentifulness for a lot of these students, there is becoming more and more of that sense of entitlement, and they're bringing that more and more into the classrooms with them in terms of expecting a lot. And that's accompanied with parents who put a lot of pressure on these teachers to give the students more, and the parents wanting to protect their precious children who they feel that they have to make sure that they have everything all really nice and always running very smoothly. And one of the areas that we haven't touched on yet that I think is very important in this whole gratitude framework is gratitude in times of adversity, because gratitude has its greatest power at these times. And by not allowing students to sort of struggle a little bit and go through a few difficult times, not in any masochistic sense, for example, then I'm concerned, and I think many educators are concerned, that they're losing that sort of strength of character that adversity can give them, their capacity to deal with a lack or the capacity to deal with things when they don't go right, because they're being so protected and so over-given, protects them from a very important kind of lifelong learning.